Welcome to the Rave Reviews Book Club Writers Conference and Book Expo. In this session, author-designers Jan Hawk and A.M. Mane are here to present Anatomy of a Book Cover. Before Jan started to publish her own books, she worked as a graphic designer for a print and online publishing office. Anne Margaret first came to graphic design when preparing materials for her family's infant adoption process, and continued to develop as a designer while working on her own book covers. Your book cover is your most vital piece of marketing material, as well as the first way in which you will interact with your readers. Although there are tried and tested methods to achieve the look you want for your book, there's also a large dose of going with your gut involved. This is why it's vital for authors and cover designers to collaborate closely in order to ensure you capture the heart and soul of your story or subject matter. Let's take a look at several of the elements you need to consider as you begin work on that all-important front cover. For the independent writer-publisher who doesn't have artistic skills or experience in typography, finding the right creative input for the cover design can be a scary process. However, some of the larger self-publishing centers, such as CreateSpace, Kindle Direct Publishing, Ingram Spark, Lightning Source, and other publish-on-demand outfits such as Lulu or Blurb, who cater for the smaller indie markets, offer design templates for those who are confident enough to have a go themselves. Most of those also offer bespoke designer services for the entire production process. These will naturally entail a fee, which will vary depending on the amount of input and time required, but is generally aimed for most pockets. Other cover design providers are easy enough to find online, and some offer off-the-peg designs or more tailored services depending on how far your budget will stretch. In addition to industry-standard design software such as Photoshop from the Adobe Creative Suite, free online graphic design tools such as Canva, Lunapic, and PicMonkey also allow authors to explore cover design without having to invest precious funds. All print-on-demand providers will offer design templates for their hard and softcover books. Here we see a typical template for a paperback. The pink areas are for the spine, front and back titles, body text, and images. The blue areas are the bleed-off and trim margins, which is where you can place the non-vital elements of the design without worrying about the more important parts of the cover being left off. The first samples we are going to look at today were achieved using Lightning Source book and cover templates. They're a subsidiary of Ingram's, who are partners with Amazon and CreateSpace. The templates cater for a wide range of book formats and sizes and are geared to industry standards for a professional result. The software required may not suit a hobbyist designer, but most print-on-demand providers cater to popular home PC software such as PDF and Office formats. Our first case study is the Scorn series designed by Jan for Eluth Publishing. Here, graphic material in the form of maps had already been created for the series, as is often the case in fantasy genres. This material was then adapted for use in the trilogy's covers. This approach depends on using color to evoke the title and to differentiate the various landscapes that are prominent in each novel. Perion's journey is concerned with traveling into the East Sea, so we did not substantially alter the original map. Shadows of the Trees has a journey of self-discovery storyline, telling of the origins of the world and how the fates of gods and men began to mingle. Here, the focus is on themes of beginnings and shadowy fates, so leafy greens dominated the final choice. The last book, The Dry Well, moves the story into the hot, fierce Southlands and focuses on the importance of life-giving water and nurture. So a wind-blown desert look presented itself for a more parched take. To maintain a consistent theme, the same method was used for the titles of all three books. So the font and color contrasts are consistent throughout, bringing cohesion to the appearance of the series.
Our next case study is from a Freebooters Fantasy Almanac, written by Jan Hawke under the pen name of Sian Glierden. This is a memoir with fantasy elements that addresses psychological illness and the impact of fantasy and dreaming on both physical and mental health. Several sets of imagery from a fantasy tarot deck Jan had designed several years ago were considered and discarded before the author-designer arrived at an appropriate look for the cover. This process is common in the creative phase of cover design. First, we were drawn to the Hierophant card, connected to Norse mythology and the god Odin's gift for prophecy and creativity. Those abilities include the willingness to accept pain and suffering. This particular image did not sit right with the book's central elven persona. Next, we considered the Hanged Man, an ambivalent card normally speaking of betrayal and again linked to Odin when he was hung upside down from the world tree Yggdrasil. The imagery here was too much associated with the opening scene of the fantasy movie Willow, and so was passed over. Odin had now become a fixation. The King of Swords was briefly considered as a warrior persona until we were sharply reminded that this was about a voyage of self-discovery and not the art of warfare. As you can see, the final image considered for the cover, the tower, does contain mythological and natural elements that communicate the primary theme of struggle with significant challenges. The stormy sea and lightning speak of inevitable and overwhelming physical and emotional hardships, whilst the godlike figure of Poseidon and the white horses represent the fates. The battered lighthouse shows a precarious hope for deliverance. The colour change on the skyline to grayscale also helped to highlight the real world merging with the fantasy one. Finally, the typography picks up on the freebooting element and the association with piracy by putting a more romantic slant on it. By using a mixture of Edwardian script for the capitals and Old English fonts, the main title was then reworked with a rumpled golden texture filter to key into the plunder to be discovered within.
In our next example, A.M. Monet's She Lights Up the Dark, which is the second book in the November Snow series, main character November rises to her new life as a vampire and must fight to maintain her humanity while adapting to her new life, as well as battling the evil plans of a fellow vampire. This cover design was created by A.M. Monet using Canva, a free web-based graphic design template tool that also provides stock images. This background image is a photo of a foggy sunrise turned upside down. Cover inspiration can come from many places, including your phone camera, but the images often require significant alteration in order to achieve the desired look. Here is the same image, filtered and tinted to the desired color and brightness. Notice how the trees and ground in the source photo have now become a night sky illuminated by a ball of light. This is accomplished with just a little filtering. Here we add a stock image to represent the protagonist. This is how it looks after cropping, but before altering the transparency and brightness to combine the face with the background image. Now the stock image has been filtered and made partially transparent until the desired effect is achieved. Here we add the title and author in the desired font. In this case, the author wanted a modern font with a youthful feel to match the age of the protagonist and the contemporary setting. Finally, we modify the text colors and transparency to integrate the words with the cover image.
The next design is for Jan Hawke's Milele Safari, which uses imagery relating directly to the storyline and the ambience that the book creates. The montage features original landscape photography and a sketch depicting the pivotal character's childhood ordeal. The author wished to highlight the theme of water and fulfillment that are fundamental to the work as a whole. The landscape is cropped and stylized, then the portrait is integrated. Finally, the lettering is created using a combination of infilled and flat lettering to achieve a cohesive look. By matching the typography to the landscape, she creates a subtler connection between the landscape and the titles. When applying your finished design to the cover template, it is vital that you are mindful of the bleed lines and margin layouts. For printed books, the work continues as you must combine the front cover with the spine and back cover, as well as the front and back flaps in the case of hardbacks. The back covers should be visually linked to the front cover and may include a blurb, a review, and/or an author photo. You must, of course, remember to leave space for the barcode.
Our final case study is the cover of the first book in the November Snow series, She Dies at the End. It is the tale of a young psychic whose only glimpse of her own future reveals that she is doomed to an early death. At the beginning of the novel, November meets the vampires and fairies who appear in her vision, and they draw her into their world and their conflicts. The author wanted to highlight the desperation of the doomed protagonist and wished to use the image of a clawed hand tearing at the ground. This motif is associated with the idea of a vampire crawling out of the grave. The original photograph was taken in the author's backyard. It was then filtered and processed to give the desired color. The author felt that this cover was not sufficiently engaging and wanted to add a face in order to more effectively draw in the reader and to help the reader connect emotionally with the primary character. You can see that the original face is a daytime shot, wholly inappropriate for a supernatural novel. It was cropped to focus primarily on the left eye, then filtered and made partially transparent. The silver leaves peeking through the translucent face convey the frailty and transient nature of all living things, which is one of the book's major themes.
First there's lights out, then there's lockup.
To sum up, we emphasize that there are many ways to create a workable cover design. The collaboration of author and designer is crucial to making a truly successful cover that brings out the full nuances of the book, even if it is a non-fiction title. In order to highlight the elements of great designs, as well as to consider some common pitfalls, let's take a quick look at the good, the bad, and the ugly. Here we compare two covers for the classic novel Frankenstein. The primary failure in the cover on the left is the central figure. He appears to be wearing medieval garments, not clothes that evoke the late 18th century. The background is also too vague and badly cropped. It conveys none of the emotions evoked by the story. It is also difficult to discern whether the figure is Dr. Frankenstein or the creature. In comparison, this penguin edition of the same book on the right looks suitably dark and gothic. It also makes dramatic use of the main themes of reanimation using electricity and the gross surgical manipulation using body parts from more than one donor. The hackneyed Boris Karloff effect has also been avoided. Another very famous novel, Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights. This first cover solution certainly would get noticed on a bookshelf or online catalog, but says nothing about the storyline or the emotional tone of the book. The design is attractive and in period for the Victorian timeline, but its bright pink hue totally fails to address the highly dramatic and tragic romance of the two most important characters, Cathy and Heathcliff. Although it's visually pleasing, it is not fit for the purpose of this book. In contrast, this second attempt captures the tumultuous landscape and emotions of this classic, with a depiction of Cathy truly showing the meaning of the word wuthering by having her appear utterly windblown, shaken, and sorrowful. The background, though not aspiring to the heights, does reflect the essence of the North Yorkshire moorland landscape, and so succeeds in describing both the setting and the atmosphere of Bronte's masterpiece. Now we examine two romance novels, one dated, the other contemporary. Enchanted Paradise may or may not be a fantasy romance. The barely visible tagline in the top left of the cover, "They risked everything for a night of passion," is certainly ambivalent and doesn't really match the montage of images, although the passion is prominently apparent. Basically, although the colors and posing get across that this is a romance, the background figures of the rainbow, badly drawn unicorn, and deer do little to let us know what the story is about. Finally, the fussy, ornate title gives an overall effect of badly chosen stereotypes, like it belongs in the 1950s, even though it was written in 1985. Right Kind of Wrong, in contrast, literally, by having black and white used to powerful effect, makes an immediate statement on the title, even though there's little else to describe the storyline. We can see that it's contemporary and clean-looking, and the two figures are artfully posed without having to rely on naked flesh to get the passion across. There's also a yin and yang thing going on to highlight the main title, which avoids the cliché of the other cover, even though it uses two differing but well-matched typefaces to fix the tone in Roman capitals and instinctive script. Crime and Punishment is a seminal work, and both of our examples reflect the stark themes of the novel by keeping things very simple and plain to reflect the title's ethos. Our first cover has no color, just black, white, and shades of gray. It uses the handcuffs to effectively symbolize the punishment element, but there's nothing else to show what the crime is that leads to that punishment. For this reason, despite the dark overtones that do match the themes covered in the novel, it's not doing the job when it comes to describing the conflicting passions of the story. The second cover, while using just three colors, a drab yellow, bloody red, and mid-gray, does the job almost faultlessly. Immediately with the blood red, obviously human handprint, you get that there is literally going to be blood on someone's hands. The positioning and inferred posture of the handprint then does a subtler but still effective job indicating a person trying to stop something or somebody. The bloody drips also emphasize a forbidding of the criminal act. The use of gray in the titles is another subtle indication of determining right and wrong, being neither black nor white, and with the light font further adding to the sometimes thin ethical line that social justice and punishment has to determine. For Anna Karenina, another very famous novel, our first example does at least get the period right by using an old sepia photograph that could have been taken during the Belle Epoque in Russia. However, this does not help in conveying any of the high passion and the shady disruption of social mores in the aristocracy, as the static pose, though typical of the time, says nothing about the storyline. The repetition of the frame above and below adds nothing to the mix. The success of our second attempt lies in its subtlety. The dreamy, indistinct woman and wintry forest scene still give a sense of time and place, while the fading away and anonymity of the female, save for her hair and necklace, hint at the status of the heroine and her growing sorrow and desperation. It does not tell us any details, but it draws us into the emotional tone of the story nonetheless. Now it's time for some in-depth fun as we look at some achingly good and stunningly bad book covers. All of the following have been chosen simply because of their visual impact. We do not intend to imply that the book inside the cover is with or without merit or excellence. We are solely commenting on the choices made for the cover impression, not the quality of the writing or the ability of the author. This cover has thriller written all over it. The upmarket house becomes more sinister looking due to the lack of color. The off-focus figure behind the gun looks like a woman, but the features are indistinct enough that they could be androgynous. This also adds to the menace and keys into the threat of not knowing whom to trust. Because the weapon is concealing the assassin's identity, the looking down the barrel of a gun cliché is successfully avoided. This is because it's making a powerful statement, stripping the detail to the bone and riveting our attention to the bullet that's inevitably going to be fired at you, the innocent and gentle reader. Now for a sci-fi thriller that also uses a montage with classic overtones in the pose of the eponymous foreground character and individually intriguing background figures. This fails because there's no tying together of the elements chosen to convey a sense of time and the nature of the human depicted. The pose kind of wastes the sign of the horns gesture by linking it to what appear to be two blade hilts that are presumably strapped ninja style to the back of the figure. Because the figure has no dramatic lighting, we're more or less working with a silhouette of solid black, so there's a fuzziness over whether these are other weapons in the hands. Ditto the gender of the ninja, but we're curiously not so intrigued by this as with the previous cover. The starry skies and smoky backgrounds are badly handled, and the other elements seemingly float around aimlessly, looking like they've just been plunked in as an afterthought, rather than purposefully placed. It's hard sometimes to find a good solution for an anthology. Harmony Kent's collection of erotic short stories, Interludes, delivers a strong generic image for us to focus on, with just two figures in virtual silhouette, so instead of just their visible features, we look instead at the way that they're positioned to convey the heat and passion that forms the common theme. The eroticism is further enhanced by both people being just naked enough and not touching at all. The way the two faces almost interlock without looking at each other instead creates an echoing dynamic to include the sensory as well as the bodily passion and the juxtaposed reflection that's created. We know this is hot and sexy without being in the least bit crude. In this example, the image itself is quite attractive. At first glance, without taking in the title or the publisher's details, we may be forgiven for thinking this is some lighthearted, probably ironic, chick lit story. Once we do notice the titles, the whole effect is a crash and burn. This is for children? From a religious publishing house? Way to guilt trip both mommy and her kids. Stylistically, this cover is sabotaged from the outset because of the negativity of the title. The actual typeface used is almost cartoon-like, which is a further turnoff to the worried purchaser who presumably wants to help a child through a troubling time. Too many mixed and unsuitable messages make this cover truly offensive. With its mostly dark blue tones at the top and bottom of this cover, fading out to a paler, still cloudy cityscape horizon, we're immediately drawn into a brooding, reflective ambiance. Although the central figure has his back to us, we can sense from his stance, and the fact that he's in a scarf and overcoat holding an umbrella, that his world is cold and uncomfortable. Because he's looking out over the modern city into the lighter distance, we perhaps guess that the second chance he's looking for is a future redemption from a past he regrets. Without knowing anything about the figure or the story, the ambiance we're given invites intrigue and interest. This cover thinks it's being clever and ironic. It's neither. With a powerful title and an instant visual association, the instinct to go minimalist and focused is definitely the way to go. But be very careful not to overthink your handling of the contrasts to emphasize the ambiance you want to create. There's nothing wrong with the color choices made here. Dark is always made more impactful when you literally highlight it with another color. However, this design completely throws away the effects of the darkness by using color for the background and then compounds it by using a light, well-spaced typeface. Reverse this, and the dark wins, hands down. Simple is good. A bolder choice of typeface would have introduced a much-needed oppressive air into the mix, regardless of whether this is sci-fi or a crime thriller. As it stands, the cover is left weak and lacking in the drama the snappy title deserves. Here, we don't need to read the book to know what's inside it, but we want to. The crosshairs of the gun sight cut straight to the chase, and the choice of location would normally give us a balmy, relaxed feeling. What's so great about the background treatment of this cover is that it deliberately turns the rather banal, almost cliché setting into a menacing scene by subverting the lighting to virtually yell suspense and mayhem at us. Simply putting on a dirty yellow tint filter and slightly desaturating the photograph turns a sunny day at the beach into a brooding and threatening environment where death lies waiting for the unwary. The shock to our usual color associations succeeds brilliantly here. Back to the montage once more. This one is spectacularly good at falling into every possible pitfall. There's a reason that Photoshop is meant to be an industry standard software tool for the expert. It's easy to learn to use it, and it's even easier to go right ahead and use it badly. The choice of images here aren't necessarily wrong, just badly applied. Again, they've been plonked on without any particular care, with no thought as to how they will gel cohesively. The hair isn't the girl's own, and the way it's overlaid gives a whole new negative slant on bad wigs. Her head and hand don't really match her body either. The dragon and the bat, or is it an owl, behind her are painted images, as is the meadow and the tree line, but at least they match the sky. The flying fortress is differently drawn, so that looks out of place too. All of these elements might have worked together more if they'd been pulled together by consistent brushwork filtering, so they at least look like they belong together. Remember, you don't have to use every trick in the box just because you can. This is how you go about designing a great montage. Choose good images first and foremost. It doesn't matter if they're photos or colored drawings, because you can apply filters to make them seem like they're in the same medium. This has the effect of making them look like they belong together. Here the girl, and we do know this is a girl because of her neck, even though we can't see her whole face, may or may not have been taken from a photograph. Ditto the night sky, with a Milky Way feel to it. What the cover artist has then done is both stylish and effective. They've chosen filter palettes that blend together, so the images appear to merge seamlessly. Just two fairly simple images combined by melting into each other, so we know this story will take us into a fantastic and mysterious mindscape of altered reality, just as the title implies. Seriously, there's actually not a lot wrong with the judgment calls that went into this design. With nonfiction titles, it's imperative to keep your cover solution focused minutely on the subject matter. Parents among us will confirm that the color choices made here are spot on. Yes, even the porcelain white has earned its place, and you know why it's there because the illustration confirms it. The red starburst is also helpful and hints at the dangers the book will touch upon. In fact, this cover is intrinsically good. Its problem is that it's so right it seems wrong. If you saw this on a leaflet or brochure, it would actually do a great job and make you laugh. Aesthetics play their part in book cover choices. This might actually work for some people, but as it's about a serious and important topic, perhaps a more clinical approach, maybe a microscopic approach, would have gotten the message across a little more tastefully. Here, another very simple image works so well in evoking the time and place of this short story, set in a bar, with a vampire on the prowl for a carefully selected victim. Black, white, and red are very powerful colors to use, and so less detail is often more effective in getting to the heart of things. Here, the cocktail glass with its red contents speaks of a dark, intoxicating passion, whether or not this is wine. The barely there ruby signet ring behind the stem carries a hint of being the kind that might be used for poisonous or hypnotic purposes. Very minimal imagery often equates to strong symbolism. This cover works on many levels, creating a dark and riveting invitation to open the book. Thanks so much for joining us today for Anatomy of a Book Cover. We hope you're enjoying the RRBC Writers Conference and Book Expo, and we encourage you to consider joining the Rave Reviews Book Club in order to continue to connect with the writers, artists, and editors you've met here. Take care and have a lovely day.